Hi, my name is Courtney Farmer, and I decided to look at the Colorado River watershed for my second project discussion. The Colorado River Basin is located in Colorado, and it actually spans into several different states. The expanse of this watershed is huge as it is the main source of water for about 10 million Americans. And some of the different inputs that it has is natural rainfall from the headwaters in La Poudre, household discharge. This can be brown water, this can be black water, industry discharge, so any kind of effluents or wastewater that they are putting in, and then the groundwater recharge. Some withdrawals that this watershed faces is the public use, so there is uptake to provide drinking water, water to shower, wash your clothes, everything for different people in this watershed. There is also industry uptake, so for cooling towers, for hydroelectric power, and other uses as well. And each year there is actually a net deficit in this watershed of 400 billion gallons. On the left here, you can see a map of the entire watershed, and you can see that it expands into several different states, including Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. It actually extends down into Mexico and ends at the Sea of Cortez in Baja California. And one important aspect of this is the water quality. So it's very significant to understand water quality because of the uses that it has, as it provides drinking water to so many different Americans. So it's important for government agencies such as the EPA, the USGS, and the Department of Public Health to understand how impaired the water is, what kinds of contaminants may be located in it, and how safe it is for people to drink and use. So there is a large database of information on this, as they have been collecting data on this watershed for some years now. And how they determine the quality of the water is actually done by TMDL, so they determine the daily maximum loads that are allowed for this watershed. They look at nutrients, so the different inputs and what that is doing to the water, and then also just daily monitoring of flow, temperature, dissolved oxygen, and other kinds of variables that affect the different qualities of the water. So one important aspect whenever you are looking into water quality and trying to maintain a certain standard of quality is actually knowing permitting. So permits are very important so that you can have a total database of what all inputs are going into the water and what kinds of effluents or what kinds of substances may be going in and discharged, or what may be taking up and being withdrawn, so that you can basically keep track of what all is in the system and how it may be affecting the system. And in this watershed, there are actually over 10,000 different permits, and these are monitored and updated by the EPA. And a lot of these range from different utilities, industry, construction. There are many different organizations that draw water up and actually discharge into the system. And everything is listed. They have records of exactly who the contact is, what company, where they are located, exactly what they are discharging, the issue date for the permit, and when the permit will need to be reevaluated. And here at the bottom, you can see there is a discharge monitoring report. And this is actually a sample report which would be filled out to obtain the permit, and just documentation paperwork to make sure that everything is up to standard and up to code with these permits. Following on the different type of permits, there were 5 different permit types that I found. So there's only 5 different types, even though there are over 10,000 different permits. They fall into these 5 main categories, which are commerce and industry, public and private utilities, construction, pesticides, and municipal storm sewer systems. And here on the left, you can see a breakdown of how they are divided up. So construction is the most prevalent type of permit that is out there, followed by utilities, commerce and industries, pesticides, and then the storm sewer systems. And each of these permits, they monitor different parameters just to make sure that everything is being up to code, up to par. And there are 41 different types of permits under these categories, which fall under reused water, so treating it, or if you're a user of it, discharge. If you have stormwater, metal mining, you can have individual permits done for research, and you can also have things such as like cooling towers for hydroelectric power generation. These permits are actually based on TMDLs, which are total maximum daily loads, which are determined for every creek and stream in the watershed, so that you know how much is actually toxic or deadly to a species or to life in general into the stream. So whether it is for human health or contamination for fish like mercury, all of these parameters are monitored, even though they are not always as up to date, or not all of them are completed as of this time. And so on the left here, you can see that there is a breakdown of different water bodies in the watershed. And then in the third column, there is a breakdown of the parameters that are being monitored in each of these water bodies and the target year for when they need them to be completed. And so all of these were actually completed as of 2017. And here we can see there is an example of parameters for the Illinois Gulch in the watershed. And you can see here that it gives you a breakdown of all of the observed limits during the low and the high flow. And these TMDLs are very important because they dictate the limits for effluents whenever they are drafting permits. So you know exactly how much discharge would still leave the water safe for use. And all of these follow 5 main steps. So in order to complete a TMDL, they follow these 5 steps. Step 1 is to select the pollutant to consider. So based on different environmental factors, like maybe previous construction that had been done in the area, or any kind of runoff that they may notice, you may want to look for certain parameters like mercury, E. coli, lead, zinc. And so then once that is determined, then you have to estimate the capacity of the water body to assimilate these different effluents. And once you have done that, you can identify all of the sources of contribution. So any kind of industry that may be discharging in there, you have to really know exactly how much so that you can really quantify how much is being put into the system. And with this information, then you can determine how much really is an allowable limit with still maintaining safety. And the 5th one is, once you've even determined the limit, you want to build in a margin of safety just in case, so that even if something were to happen, you're not on that borderline where the water will become unusable and unsafe. So you want to build in a margin of safety with every one of these parameters. So with a high volume of TMDLs completed, you can actually assess the impairment of the watershed. And this actually is not done just with TMDLs and pollutants. You actually can look at this as the drainage rate. You can look at flow, the different species that inhabit it, and different other hydrology factors as well. And so one thing that, while there isn't a high amount of pollutant load, as you can see in this picture at the bottom, a lot of these streams are really not impaired. So water supply, agriculture, aquatic life, some of them are not impaired. And while there may not be impairment, there is still danger in this watershed as it has been drained very rapidly. So in the picture on the left, you can see this is actually right by the Hoover Dam. And there is a white ring around where the water has been drained over 130 feet lower since the year 2000. There has been a huge drought in this area that is contributing to this, and also increased population leads to increased water usage. So therefore, there is a fear, as the Colorado is slowly drying up and actually has not reached its exit point at the Sea of Cortez in about 10 years now. With all of the TMDLs and other concerns in the watershed, there are some concerns about how to fight the water deficit and the drought that is currently being experienced in this watershed. Some of the main ways that they are trying to do this is by placing more dams, which actually act as reservoirs to store water during times of drought. Also, limiting water consumption by water appropriation. So, there are some legislation plans that have actually limited the amount of water that is drawn up by each state and to help reduce the deficit in the watershed and reduce the amount of water that is being pulled out. And there are some various debates on how to mitigate some of the issues in the watershed. So while there's not a large amount of actual impairment to the water, mostly the concerns stem from just the less amount of water that is left in the watershed with the growing population and larger industries coming in using all of the water. And there are lots of different vested interests, such as companies, state organizations, restoration groups, and others. And really, reducing the amount of water consumption is one of the highest priorities in this watershed because that is the greatest concern. These are all of the sources that I used to work on this project. So I thank you for your time, thank you for listening, and hope you have a great day.